Welcome to the Small Business Made Simple podcast, brought to you by socialmediaandmarketing.com.au. Being in business is never easy, but it can be simple, or at least simpler. Join me, your host Jenn Donovan, every week where we focus on marketing, social media, and working towards simplifying your business. You with me? Let's do this.
Gonna dream it big, 'cause someone out there listening. Everyone's got a voice to give, and it's time I heard you whistling, 'cause there's no point at all, in dreaming small,
Why, hey there, my fabulous listener. Well, it's here. I've literally waited 100 weeks for this and never 100% sure that I would make it. But alas, I'm here. I'm telling you, it's our 100th episode. I am absolutely stoked to be telling you it's episode 100. If you're a first-time listener, then super welcome to you. I'm not normally this excited, but hey, I've done 100 episodes, so I'm having my own little tea party here. If you're a return listener, then hey, I'm super excited to have you joining me here for what will be a pretty epic episode. I am, of course, the host, Jenn Donovan, and it's my job via this podcast, social media, and just about everywhere else that I hang out to make your business life simpler. I'm a thought leader when it comes to marketing here in Australia and a marketing strategist for small business. Why am I these things, and why have I got this podcast? Because I know that business can be lonely and hard, and it's pretty complicated sometimes, and it's rarely easy. But in my heart, I know it should be simple, or at least simpler. So that's my commitment to you on the so-named Small Business Made Simple podcast. Another way that I can make your life a little bit simpler is if you come and join my Facebook group, Like-Minded Business Owners. It's a great little community in there, growing every day. But it's really great just to get to know other small business owners and share some love and ask some questions and get some answers, of course. You can go to Facebook and just search Like-Minded Business Owners, or you can come to the show notes at socialmediaandmarketing.com.au/100. When I was thinking about the topic for this podcast, I have to say I had several buzzing around in my head. And then I had this thought that I've never really talked about podcasting as a marketing strategist. As a marketing strategy on my podcast, or at least I've really never dedicated a whole episode to it. So guess what we're talking about today? Yep, podcasting. I'm going to chat to you about how it's fundamentally changed me. Yep, not a word of a lie, and my business. And I'll give you some reasons why perhaps you should think about starting a podcast as well. And I'll share with you some of the insights and the do's and don'ts of podcasting, including if you are a guest on a podcast. Maybe you have no intentions of starting one, but a few little tips and tricks around being a guest on a podcast as well. So, where to begin on this epic 100th episode? Well, probably a good place to start is why I started my podcast. Now, if we don't know each other, then you're probably going to screw your nose up a little bit at this, to be honest, because I'm going to be brutally honest with you as to why I started my podcast, and it isn't a pretty scenario, if I'm totally honest with you. I am a lovely person, so no judgment, please. But back in 2018, I was working in a marketing business with a fellow marketer who had always said, I want to start a podcast, but he never did. And I had seriously had itchy feet about starting one, but it was his rock show, so I didn't step on his toes. That business partnership, of course, ended abruptly, which was actually the best thing that could have ever have happened to me, although I didn't know it at the time. So in spite, my first thought was, I'm going to start a podcast. So this podcast started probably in spite, because I wasn't allowed to start one, and now it was like, just watch me. I am going to do this. Not the best moral standing in the world, but hey, it was my best decision in the world, hands down. I knew nothing about podcasting except that I really wanted to do one. So YouTube became my best friend. It was December 2018. So really everyone was on the wind down. Everything from someone who could build me a website to someone who could actually walk me through. So I had to do it all by myself. I ordered the equipment. I got a list from a fellow podcaster and just ordered the same equipment that they had. I YouTubed the heck out of everything I thought I needed to know. And on January 3, 2019, I put my first episode out. The first episode I will never listen to because I just remember how I edited the heck out of that. I still edit all my podcasts. They're all done in-house. But I remember thinking, oh gosh, people don't want to hear me breathe, or people don't want to hear me, do this or do that. So I edited out every single imperfection, which of course, now if you're a listener, maybe I should edit a little bit more. There's lots of imperfections, but I kind of figure that I want my podcast to sound like what it would if you sat across the table from me, and we were having a wine or we were having a coffee together, because that's who I am. So I will make mistakes talking in real life. So that's what's going to happen on my podcast as well. Interestingly, my first episode is still downloaded a few hundred times each month, which means that people are finding my podcast, whatever episode they are finding it on, but then they go back and they start at the beginning. And I often get emails or DMs on Instagram from people saying, I found your podcast and now I'm hooked and I've listened to like 20 episodes this week already. And I think to myself, wow, that's a whole lot of Jen. But I do hear it often. And I think the fact that my very first episode is listened to consistently every month means that people must be enjoying my podcast. So now you know why I started, and I'm really, really glad I did. It's fundamentally changed me, changed my life. It's changed my business. And in fact, I go as far as to say it's the number one marketing strategy I've used to grow my business. Even if people don't listen to it, it's still helping me grow my business. So let me explain a little bit around that. So here's some thoughts on guests. Let's start with guests, because I've had some amazing guests on my podcast. Yes, guests is a really good way of growing your listenership, because they have an audience that perhaps you can tap into by having them on your podcast. But that's not the number one reason why you should choose the guests for your podcast. Some of the guests I've had would literally charge me thousands of dollars per hour to tap into their brains to find out, how they can help a small business owner. And I get to chat to them for free for probably an hour, or some cases even longer than that, because of course there's always before and after conversations, which is one of the highlights of having a podcast, is having these before and after conversations with amazing people. Building relationships, human-to-human marketing, you all know that's a huge part of my business and my business philosophy. So having an hour with someone chatting about life and business and family, it really does start to build a relationship. And for some guests that I've had on my podcast, I have actually gone on to build a friendship with many of these guests. Other guests I've managed to, they've reached back out and offered me speaking opportunities, either with them or in front of their audiences, or just a referral to another client, whether they're a client for me or a referral for another speaking client. All this business I would not have got if it wasn't for my podcast. And on guests, probably the not so fluffy bit, just let me say this. If you ever are a guest on a podcast, or if you ever start your own podcast and have someone as a guest, realize that it is your own space. So that probably goes if you are the podcast host. It's your space. It's your space to allow and disallow whatever you think. I've recorded guest episodes that you'll never hear. And I've edited the absolute living daylights out of other guests that you have heard. Firstly, if I have a guest on, I really feel like I'm recommending these people to you, to my audience. I'm saying this person is a good person, they give great value, they're an expert in whatever it is that they do or whatever it is that they sell. And if I don't feel that, then you're not coming on my podcast. Therefore, some guest requests have definitely been rejected. In fact, you get a lot of requests for people to come on your podcast when you do have a podcast. So you can be selective. But I've also done a couple of interviews with people and thought to myself, you know what, I'm really not convinced that you know what you're talking about, so I'm not going to air this one. All of my guests actually sign a talent release form before they come on, and basically it says all the IP or the intellectual property is mine to do with it what I wish, and there's no guarantee your episode will be aired. It's purely my decision. And secondly, still on the point of guests, this is my marketing strategy and not their place to sell. So I've had some guests that have come on and they've sold hard. Like, I mean, really, really hard. They're selling their business hard on my podcast. These are the ones that get edited. Because my business philosophy or ethos is give, 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 ask. I wouldn't do 100 episodes of a podcast for free if I didn't have the business ethos of give, 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 ask. And someone is not coming on to my podcast to sell to my audience relentlessly, and especially if they don't match up with my business values. Now, you won't have noticed any of this, or I hope you haven't noticed any of this, because I've certainly edited people out. You sell on someone's podcast by not selling at all. For me, guests come on this podcast and give such incredible insights, so much incredible value, that the listener literally goes, I have to contact this person. And that's why there's always tell me how people can contact you, because that's how you sell on someone else's real estate, someone else's land, which of course my podcast is. So if you're ever a guest on someone's podcast, respect their space and respect their audience. And if you have a show of your own, either now or in the future, respect your space. It is yours. This podcasting stuff is, it's seriously hard work. So don't let someone else come in and steal your audience or make you feel uncomfortable by airing something. It's totally up to you. So that's the end of my crankiness with podcasting. It's like my like-minded business owners group. I have marketers who come in there and they just try and sell to my members. And I'm like, bugger off, this is my group. And then I have other marketers who come in and they give such incredible value. They're so lovely to my audience that when it's time for them to sell, I open them with open arms because they have done the give, 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 ask. But that's just me. And I might add that some of my guests have also become my business besties as well. So having guests on my podcast is definitely been something that I have attributed to the success of the podcast and to changing me and changing my business as well. Some other ways that podcasting has actually changed me and my business, other than guests, is know, like, and trust factors. What better way to get to know someone, get to know what they know and what they're an expert in, and find out whether or not you're going to like them or trust them, than to listen to them every single week for 100 weeks in a row, or however many weeks it is that they have podcasts, or however many episodes they have out there. It's a great way to get to know, like, and trust someone. Now, I know I'm not for everybody, and I'm sure there's people who have listened to one episode and they've never come back, and that's okay, because realistically, there's only me. I couldn't handle helping everybody anyway. So I just want the people who resonate with me. And it's the same with your business. Not everyone is your ideal customer. You just want those that gel the best with you. And of course, will be willing to one day do business with you. But it's not everybody. In fact, I'd say that many of my clients have probably found me on social media, listened to my podcast, come into my private Facebook group, Like-Minded Business Owners, and maybe even had a DM or an email conversation with me before they've actually purchased something from me. It really is that whole marketing scenario of touch points, and it really is know, like, and trust someone. But know, like, and trust actually works other ways for podcasting as well. It depends on your goals of the podcast. I get that. And not everyone has the same goals of their podcast that I do. But people who don't want to become my clients, but maybe they actually want me to speak to their clients via a webinar or from the stage, or maybe they want to refer me as a speaker. And to have a podcast where they get the opportunity to hear my authority as a marketing thought leader and a small business strategist, it's all here for them to hear. It's all here for them to hear, and it's all here for them to hear on a podcast. They don't need to go much further than to listen to a few episodes to decide whether I am the right fit for their audience or I am the right fit for the audience they want to refer me to. And when they reach out to me, it's kind of like picking dates that are suitable for the both of us rather than am I a good fit, because they already know, like, and trust me before they reach out. One of my big goals for 2020 was to do more speaking. So it is part of my business goals, and podcasting sits under that. And I've certainly done a lot more speaking this year, but unfortunately it's all been via Zoom. So it is 2021 goal. It is 2021's goal to do it more via the stage. And I know that hitting 100 episodes here in my podcast is going to help people see my authority in this space and see my level of commitment to marketing and social media. There's plenty of podcasts out there that die long before they get to double figures or triple figures, and that's okay. It depends on their business model, of course. But for me, podcasting at this point is way too important to give up for lots of reasons that I've already given, and lots that I'll continue to give you in a few minutes. I've just spoken about authority, of course, along with know, like, and trust, but putting content out every week about a subject for a particular audience, which is you, is all about authority in the industry for sure. And some people think that podcasting is actually a one-sided conversation. I think those people who think that are A, that they don't have a podcast themselves, and B, maybe they don't listen to podcasts either, because I listen to podcasts a lot. In fact, there's probably, I don't know, maybe a dozen podcasts that I try and get to every single week. And I feel like these people are my business besties, or just my besties, because not every podcast that I listen to is a business orientated one. Some people I'll never meet in my life, but I feel like they know me so well and that I know them so well. So I kind of feel close to these people just from having them in my ears week after week after week. And my audience is probably a little the same. It's no coincidence that I talk to you and I use you language, like fabulous podcast listener, my friend, etc. I'm not talking to the masses. I feel like you and I are actually having a conversation, even though I can't hear you answer any questions or yell at me or question what I'm talking about until, of course, you DM me or email me or let me know, which you are more than welcome to do. But that's the conversation we're having. I really feel like, even though it's me talking and you listening, that we are having this two-sided conversation. Of course, when people do send me a little email or a DM, it does give me the warm and fuzzies. So please, if you ever want to reach out, you are more than welcome to do that. I love that. And nothing brings me more business joy than hearing from my listeners, either online or even in my supermarket. And just a little secret about podcasting as well. People who don't do podcasting and perhaps never will, because maybe it's just not part of their business model, or maybe they're not in business at all, think that people who have podcasts are pretty amazing. There's this air of grandeur from people that don't have a podcast to people who do have a podcast. They just think it's this complex and difficult thing that only famous people get to do, which is so untrue, but a little heartwarming that people think you are really special if you have your own podcast. So how has it changed me? It's definitely made me a more confident person, both in myself and in my authority and in my knowledge, and also in my speaking. I pretty much live, breathe, and talk marketing 7 days a week. So I really feel quite confident that when people throw questions at me, whether it's on an Instagram Live or a Facebook Live or, in real life, that I'm quite confident in answering those questions. That's come from doing this consistently every single week. Yes, you can get that level of confidence and that level of confidence in your authority and your expertise other than having a podcast, but it's kind of like this is how it's changed me. So it's definitely helped me in that way. I actually also have the confidence to tell people that I don't know and that I'll get back to them after doing some research. I think that is probably a level of growth that I've seen since I've been podcasting as well. And even though I still get nervous going on stage, it's more exciting nervous than I'm going to be sick nervous, which it used to be, because when I talk about marketing, this is something I talk about every single week, 7 days a week. So it's just me talking about the same thing slightly differently to maybe a slightly different audience with a microphone in my hand, as opposed to looking at my computer screen and having a recording device like I'm doing here to record my podcast. My podcast has also made me do lots of research as well, because I really want to keep up to date with the trends and ideas. So I've really not only honed my research skills, but I've learnt to listen to certain people. So I've basically learnt who and what to listen to. And there are a lot of people out there who say they are an expert in marketing and social media, but really they're not. So I've learnt who I can trust and who I should be listening to, because I don't have a direct line to Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn. So I really do have to sort of rely on the authority of other people who are a little bit more ingrained and closer to people. And of course, everything's for test and measure as well, which is exactly what we should be doing with marketing. So if I hear that something is working, I'll test, I'll measure it, and then of course I will talk about it if it does in fact work. I'd have to say also it's just made me a more confident human. Podcasting has made me more confident. But don't get confident mixed up with cocky. Definitely not that. Just more confident. I know there's still so much to learn, but I would say that podcasting every week has definitely made me confident in myself and my knowledge for sure. I've learnt what it takes to be a thought leader in marketing and have a clear vision of what I want and how I'm going to get there and what it's going to take to get me there. When I started podcasting, 100 episodes ago, it would take me about 4 to 6 hours to do an episode. Now it's more like, probably 2, maybe 3, depending on the episode and how much research I need to do. But like I said at the start, I still do all my editing. There are lots of places to outsource your editing, but at this stage, I'm quite comfortable in doing all my editing still. So it is a commitment to do a podcast. It's not something that you can just do, well, maybe you can do in an hour, but it's not something that I can just do in an hour. I always write my show notes because, they're always available, of course, at socialmediamarketing.com.au/podcast, because I know there's people in my world that actually have audible issues, but they still want to be involved with what I'm doing. So they read the show notes. Plus, I think they're quite good for SEO for my website as well. Not that I'm an SEO expert, but I do write show notes just about for every episode, except if I have a guest on. I'll always encourage people to actually go to my website to listen to the podcast. And that's why I never really give out my Apple Podcast or my Spotify link, even though I know that's where most people do listen to this podcast. I want the web traffic. So I will always point people to my website to listen to the podcast. And that's, of course, a bit of a podcasting tip. That's why it exists on my website. The more traffic I can get there, the better I will rank, of course. Classic SEO. But I have to say, recording and editing, they are probably the easy bit when it comes to podcasting. Marketing and getting listeners is the harder bit and the more time-consuming bit of podcasting for sure. You can have the most amazing podcast, but if no one listens, then it's a tough gig for you to keep going. So this is what my marketing looks like in a given week. give or take some of these factors depending on the episode, of course. So every week I'll email my list. I'll post on LinkedIn, Facebook, in my Facebook group, on Instagram at least twice a week about the episode, sharing different parts of the episode with different assets, so different pictures and things like that. And of course, this includes stories on Instagram and Facebook as well. I'll post into other people's groups who offer things like, hashtag episode Monday or hashtag podcast Wednesday, or other groups that I really feel that would benefit from this week's episode. So it's not always the same group because it does change depending on the topic that I'm talking about. My VA then reschedules my podcast episodes for every 3, 6, and 9 months on social media so that they are being seen not just the once, but in 3 months, 6 months, and 9 months. And my VA also turns my show notes into blogs and schedules them as well. And again, they get scheduled for 3, 6, and 9 months. I also do video and audio snippets as stories or as reels on Instagram and Facebook. And besides all this, my podcast host, which is Lipson, pushes my podcast out to iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Deezer, Ghana, Amazon Music, Google Play Music, radio.com, a podcast page, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and of course my website. So it does go far and wide every single episode. And I don't tell you this to scare you, but you've got to have the right systems and processes in place, that's for sure. And, having the right systems and processes in place does make this a little bit easier. But marketing does take time, just like marketing anything else. So you've got to know why you want to do a podcast and how it's going to help you build your business and how it's going to help you one day make money from it, I guess, whether it's from building authority and having people come into your business that way, or whether, of course, you get sponsors to come in and sponsor your podcast episodes as well. So my question to you on episode 100 is, do you want to build your authority? Do you want to build your know, like, and trust factors with your audience even quicker? Do you want to become the go-to person in your industry? And do you want to be more confident around what you do? Have you ever thought about podcasting yourself? If I'm completely honest, and I think I have been in this podcast a little bit too much maybe, I was actually thinking about doing a podcast course specifically to be announced on my 100th episode. But for me, courses on podcasting when I was starting wouldn't have been what I was looking for. If I had the opportunity to have someone one-on-one walking me through the process, giving me the tips and tricks, showing me the road less traveled, making sure I wasn't hitting all those bumps that they hit and that I didn't do what they did wrong, then I would have actually jumped at it. Because admittedly, there were definitely things that I did wrong in the beginning and that I would want to make sure that I would do better next time to get better results a lot quicker. So rather than a course, if you're listening to this when it airs or, in the future, I'm going to offer 5 spots to anyone who wants to start a podcast for me to walk with them. So hold your hand and walk you through the process, from what equipment to use, to knowing your audience and your goals, to a launch strategy, to all the tech that you need, to the systems and processes that can help make your life simpler, to marketing your podcast and getting results. So I just wanted to offer 5 spots because I know there are people out there who would love to start a podcast but think it's just all too hard or it's all too complicated. So if you're listening to this and you think that could be me, let's have a chat. If you decide that this is for you, then we'll have a dedicated chat in Messenger just for you and I, so we can tick off to-do lists, and we'll do Zoom calls once a week. You can ask any questions you want, and I will actually keep you accountable as well. So this isn't something that you never get done. Like buy a course, I'm going to do it one day, but there's no accountability, because I think accountability is huge. It will be intense, and you do get the opportunity to set the pace, of course, but you also need to be held accountable. for whatever it is that you want to achieve. And that's where I would love to help you. So if you're interested, let's have a chat. Book a discovery call with me, a 30-minute free discovery call, because maybe podcasting is just something you want to talk about for now. Does this sound like a good podcast, Jen? Maybe you haven't got all your balls in a row. So let's just have a chat. You can book a discovery call with me at bit.ly/discover with Jenn. So discover with Jenn. So bit.ly/discover with Jenn. I would love to hold your hand and walk you through the process of setting up a podcast, because I know it's changed my life. It's changed my business and it's changed me. And I would love that for you too, if that fits your business model. So if you're keen, let's have a bit of a chat. We can work out installments, if you want to pay in installments or anything like that. I would have to say that given all the research that I had to do, all the hours and hours I sat down trying to work things out for myself, I would have easily have spent upwards of $6,000 if I charged all that out at my hourly rate. So my cost for doing this, for holding your hand and walking you through from start to finish with your podcast, is about $1,500. And of course, like I said, we can arrange some installments. So if this is something that's lighting you up, let's have a chat. But that's it for episode 100. I can't believe it took so long to get here, and now, boom, there it goes. We are done. Thank you so much for being a listener. Like, hand on heart, I so appreciate you listening in, and I really hope that I've inspired you, even if you've never wanted to do a podcast before, that perhaps just lit that little bit of inspiration in you of what a difference getting out there and showing your authority can actually do. Maybe if you don't want to start a podcast, maybe your thing is you should start becoming a guest on different podcasts to show your authority that way. If you've got any questions, send me a DM on Instagram or head into Like-Minded Business Owners into my Facebook group and ask all the questions there. I will, of course, be back next Thursday for episode 101, and I can't wait to help you simplify your business even more towards as we finish off 2020 and head into 2021. If you're enjoying this podcast so far, I'd love you to hit the subscribe button and share it with maybe another superstar business owner who's doing that daily grind, who would really appreciate you making their business life simpler. Hey, maybe they might even want to start a podcast. But anyway, let's get social on social until we speak next week. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and of course on LinkedIn. But whatever you do, my small business peeps, as my opening song says, there is no point in dreaming small.
Tell I can feel it, say it proud, be true, and let us see you for the star that you are. No point in dreaming small.